are we headed into a depression? We're already in a recession. We know that, multiple quarters of negative GDP. But where are we going from here? We're going to be discussing, is it in that direction or is it in a further inflationary environment? And how does this all affect silver prices? And how does this general theme, albeit a short-term trend where energy prices have tailed off, but a general uptrend theme of higher inflationary energy prices, how will that affect silver? And how will that contribute to a potential silver shortage? We're talking to my good friend, Mike Konnert. He is the CEO of Vizsla Silver. They are one of the only pre-producing silver companies that is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We'll link Vizsla Silver website right there down below. Smash the like button on this video and let me know, do you think that the growing overall energy prices, irrespective of the short term, will continue to contribute to a decreased output in silver prices as some less profitable mines have to be pulled offline? You let me know in the comments right there down below. And thank you for listening. So, Mike, good to see you.
Jake, great to see you. I'm happy to be catching up with you today. We've probably got lots to talk about when it comes to silver.
Yeah. So my first question is, in your opinion, are we headed to a depressionary scenario, or are we headed to an inflationary scenario in the next level of the mirage where people think everything is fine again?
Well, it's interesting. I really don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. I wish I did. But, I suppose I do in a sense. I do think that there's going to be more chaos around the world, just, whether that's through a depression or, an inflationary period here. I think it's probably more likely to be inflationary after, what we just saw. You and I were talking before this about, the Inflation Act, which is, ironically called the Inflation Act because, it's going to cost far more inflation. But, it appears to me, and, from my experience that, in these situations, the solution to these problems are to just print money. Solution to chaos is to print money. And we're seeing that still. And I know that, of course, silver thrives in these periods of chaos and inflation. So, again, I don't know if we're heading towards a depression. What do you think about that?
I think that we're already in one. It's just a matter of whether it's a deflationary or an inflationary one. And I think a lot of that depends on if the political pressure is great enough that causes a push to move rates back the opposite direction towards zero. The reality is people are getting wiped out, absolutely wiped out. Then you couple that with new home sales. They plummeted here in America. I was just reading some data on that yesterday. My neighbor owns a construction company, and I was just talking to him yesterday. And I said, so how's it going? And he kind of gave me a little bit of a look and said, things have slowed down. People are starting to get concerned and aren't sure what's going to happen next. Mm-hmm. And so, if that picks up, we've got quite a bizarre environment, which ultimately, after the damage settles, what's the solution? The solution is going to be, well, let us print $1 trillion. And this is the Everyday American Rescue Act, and it's 18 trillion. And this is to rescue Americans from greedy energy companies and greedy food companies. So that trend kind of seems to be continuing, but I think a lot of it based off of interest rates. And so on that subject, as a miner, one question I wonder is, how do interest rates affect, for instance, silver output? And maybe not on a 30-day basis, but in the event that the Fed is not balking and they will either continue to move rates up or just not move them back down to zero for a while. How is that going to affect the mining industry? There's been the U.S. Mint came out, I believe it was in 2021, and said there's silver shortage. Then they kind of backtracked it. And of course, we've got all this Green New Deal type of movement globally. Gavin Newsom said yesterday, I think they officially signed into law in California, you cannot purchase a gasoline car after 2035. Of course, all of this is more and more commodities in general. So we've seen these types of shortages building across the board in commodities. How is silver affected by an interest rate environment that is on the rise? Will that contribute to a growing shortage or not really?
Well, I think it's part of a mix, right? Part of a scheme of things that are going to impact the silver shortage here. Part of that, of course, if your costs go up, if you're operating a mine and you're already, operating at a certain cost level, your inputs go up, whether it's interest on debt, whether it's, fuel costs going up, which of course they're trying to tame the fuel costs by raising rates. Is it working? That doesn't seem to be fully working just yet. But I think the biggest one is that if you're in a situation right now where you're already selling your silver for less than what it was, whatever it was 6 months ago, 4 months ago, the price has come down a little bit. Your inputs are going up. You're getting marginally closer to break even. Some of these mines already will be at break even, or they're making a few $1 million a year, and soon they're going to be operating at a loss. That only stops silver supply hitting the market. Of course, that creates a shortage. Now that can turn on if the silver price rises or if the inputs go down in cost. But where we're also seeing this too, and I always talk about this, is that a lot of silver is produced as a byproduct from larger mines all around the world, larger copper mines specifically in South Africa or South America, I should say. And it's become harder and harder to mine in those areas. The government of Chile and other places are asking for more royalties. The environmental permits of two big mines in Chile just got rejected. So we're starting to see that not only does rising input costs in silver primary mines impact things, but we're also seeing difficulty in building the big copper porphyry mines that have silver as a byproduct in South America. So there's a couple of ways that supply is being threatened there. It'll be interesting to see though what comes of silver here in this preparing for this shortage here, because really there aren't many other mines out there. Silvercrest just started Las Chispas, but that's maybe I think about 4 or 5 million ounces of silver and some gold annually. Meg Silver starting theirs up relatively soon here. It should be producing at a commercial scale relatively soon. But other than that, next to Vizsla, I don't know what the next major mine will be to meet that shortage. But you've got a lot of pressures and influences happening to the silver price right now. Of course, people are always complaining about gold and silver not doing their job as an inflation hedge, or in a hedge in the time of a stock market, a poor performance stock market. But, the percentage that silver and gold have come off recently compared to the percentage that the S&P has come off, I would argue that silver and gold have been doing their job, gold particularly. And what we typically see is that silver, performs further on extremes over gold. So when gold goes down, silver is going to go down proportionally more. When gold goes up, it lags, and then silver outperforms gold by a significant amount. And so this is fine. This situation where we're in with these precious metals, this is kind of typical. This is what we typically see going back. But I'm confident that there will be a time, much like in 2020, where we saw these precious metals absolutely rip. And I think it could be very soon for silver here. But, when that happens, it happens in a matter of days. And it's good to be positioned now versus waiting for that to happen.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned Chile. There's been a lot of the Central and South American countries that do a lot of mining that have either had a historical tendency towards these centralized socialist states that ultimately moved towards nationalization of various commodities. You mentioned Chile. I know there's been a few other ones. And between that, in addition to, you mentioned copper, but also from the industrial side of, in a recession, if less copper is produced, does the nationalization of copper and or silver mines in Central and South America, and that movement, not in the next 6 months, but let's say that movement over the next decade to half a decade, will that influence the global output of silver if companies find it to be less viable to operate business there, if there's less investment going there? Can that influence it, or is that an overstated scenario?
No, I think absolutely it can. I think the industry itself has suffered from a massive lack of investment over the last couple of decades, really, since, I suppose the last real period of major investment would have ended in 2010. So, since then, there's been hardly any dollars invested in exploration and finding or building or developing new silver mines, new copper mines with silver as a byproduct. So we're coming towards this cliff here, absolutely, of very massively underinvested pipeline of projects, threats globally for the development of projects. It's incredibly difficult to permit and put a mine in most places in the world. Ironically, even in the U.S., when they're talking about wanting stable and national supply of energy metals and critical metals, even copper, and then it's near impossible to permit copper mines in the United States, even in Alaska. So, the rhetoric is funny because it's different. People say, no, we need this, we want this metal. We need this for solar panels. We need this for electric vehicles. But the NIMBYism is strong as well, too. They want it done in America, but not in anyone's backyard. So, when you think about how difficult it is, even in a place like the United States, to get something permitted. And then you think about, well, what about the threat of nationalism in South America for project investment? You have to just realize that it's getting harder and harder, and it's scaring away investment in the space. So that also creates that looming shortage, that pathway towards a shortage as well. And I just mentioned the last two silver mines, to go into production. And those were in Mexico. Mexico remains one of the only places that I would invest my money into building a silver mine.
Yeah, I know Pan American has some silver mines down in South America, and if you exclude Mexico and say Canada, you've got Central and South America as a pretty significant contributor to global silver output. As an executive, do you believe, as this move towards nationalizing their commodity assets, that will create a big dent? Is there a point at which institutions are not going to want to give companies money to be down there, especially considering this macroeconomic environment we're in, which historically speaking, when you have these collapses in slow motion of the economic systems or the economy, you do generally have a move towards socialism, which one of the tenets of socialism is, of course, confiscation of other people's assets in the highest and best good of the state. And so can that trend make a big dent. I don't know the exact data on how much silver is mined down in those countries, but what are we talking there on what type of impact that could have over this?
That could be up to 30% of annual supply.
Yeah, so it's a lot then, huh?
Yeah, could be pretty significant. Yeah.
Now, do you think, as an executive, there is a point at which companies will, or institutions funding those companies will want to hit the brakes on money that's flowing down to South America, for example?
Well, that is possible. Hard to say because, there are institutions that like to invest in the DRC or Russia. And I think it's just that as it always comes down to in this, it's cost of capital. Your cost of capital goes up if there's fewer potential suppliers for that capital because of geographical limitations. The cost of capital increases, and so you have to therefore find a project that has high enough returns to stomach those that higher cost of capital. But your blue chip funds, will have a harder time doing that. A lot of times it's difficult. I mean, it's not easy to raise money in this industry right now. We've kind of gone through a bit of an austerity moment here with financing junior mining companies. So, it doesn't make it harder. Yes. Does that also impact the lack of investment? Does it increase the lack of investment in these countries for these mines that also help supply silver? Yeah, that's true as well. So, there's probably black swans. There's probably lots of things that can happen here that'll really kick the silver price through the roof again in the future. But all of these are factors that are leading into kind of the bullish case for the metal. Certainly, the difficulty in South America for byproduct silver. The lack of investment in other deposits and mines around the world because of the difficult capital market scheme for junior mining, and then the kind of the two-sided rhetoric of let's permit and build mines in our own country, but we don't want it in anyone's backyard. Kind of it's interesting. It's not an easy industry to to be in, but
as someone who's a longer term and a long term, really a lifetime investor, cyclically in the mining stocks, but certainly lifetime in the physical metals, and as someone who has other income streams and thus is not really too fixated on short term. When I look at the longer landscape, of course, you have this macroeconomic environment where in our lifetime, probably sooner than a broad statement like that, probably more in the shorter term, we are facing a global credit collapse, a global debt market collapse, a fiat debasement that eventually will have a climax. You have that, which of course is silver becomes a safe haven for people to move. Then you have the electrification of the world. You correct me on the data, but I think somewhere around it's maybe 70-30 in terms of industrial demand of silver versus retail. Both of those are going to be pushed up. Electrification, the increase in silver that's needed in tech, batteries, solar. Let's paint a little bit of that macro landscape as someone who's really dedicated their entire life on the premise of higher silver prices like you have. What are the main themes that someone investing silver should be keeping in mind when you're in this type of confusing environment where you're seeing the decay of the system, you're not seeing the price of metals move in response to that? What's the important larger themes to keep in mind here? We talked about some earlier, of course, but what are some of the other ones?
Well, first of all, I think we all want to see higher silver prices, higher gold prices, and these things. But with Vizsla specifically, we're building a district here that, and the reason that we love this project and what we're doing so much here is that it's the kind of project that can survive in all price environments. Essentially, that's what we're looking for when we build this project. So, obviously, you want a higher silver price, you want higher margin, you want to make a ton of money in this huge district, and that's what we're going for. But I think what really is important to think about and to keep in mind is that there simply isn't enough metal and to satisfy all of these goals of governments around the world. Even if they were to do 10% of what they're planning on doing in terms of like you talked about Newsom and others of mandating electric vehicles, even if there's 10% of these huge aspirations that the governments and the tastemakers around the world are trying to do, we simply don't have enough metal for it. So there's going to have to be, when we've worked it out before, and I know Craig has mentioned this on the call before when we've had these joint calls with Craig, but there's going to have to be tens of billions of dollars invested in mines all around the world in a very short period of time, in order to kind of keep these dreams afloat. Now, I don't know how possible that'll be, and so in order to satisfy the demand that's going to come from the green initiatives and electrification of the world, the incentive price of the metal, aka the price that the metal sells for, will have to go up to incentivize further investment, and B, lower grade projects going into production. So we're in a scenario here where, as Rick will probably say, the solution for lower prices is lower prices, I think, something like that. And, we'll continue to kind of work on these projects to kind of move these assets along, knowing that eventually the price has to go up to meet the demand here. So I always say there's a couple of ways to win with silver, electrification, and then the safe haven trade. I think we actually are seeing that safe haven trade happening now, where prices, they're not flying, but they're proportionally down less than you would be if you were in the S&P and other asset classes. So, the timeline is always difficult when you're looking at it week to week or month to month. But zooming out and taking a look over a longer time frame, I think it's a great time to be in these metals.
So in California, they're making this big push. You can only have an electric car if you're buying something by 2035. But one of the problems in California is the electric grid. Ever since I grew up there, born and raised, so when I was a kid, we even had a lot of these problems, and that's when, rolling blackouts and you've got to turn your air conditioner to 95 degrees in the summer and whatever, obviously I'm joking a bit there, but this call to move in this direction, you've got to strengthen the energy grids, not just in California, but globally. How much of an impact will silver have in the grid? You've had Biden and many people saying, well, we're going to put electric vehicle charging stations all over the place. I mean, these types of infrastructure things, they need a lot of silver, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you need silver for semiconductors. You need it for electronics. You need it for, I think it's Keith Neumeyer that says that, copper might be the highway for the electrification, but the glue is silver. And I think that's probably a great way to describe it. It's impossible to have, the grid without silver. And, there really isn't a substitution, an effective substitution for silver. So it can certainly withstand, higher silver prices as this is all being transformed. And the grid is old too in these states, and in in the United States in particular. It's not new. It's not a modern power grid, and it really will be needed to be replaced and enhanced and built on a higher scale, higher scope, and more high quality. And all of that has to do with metal. We've also, shareholders of Vizsla that have been shareholders, since you and I started talking a while back would also have some Vizsla copper shares, because we spun that out of Vizsla silver. So, we love copper as well. We think that's important for the grid, but silver is really the way that we like to play the electrification theme.
So, give us an update on Vizsla. Where are you guys at? What's going on? I mean, obviously, your goal from a long-term perspective is there's a growing demand for silver, and there is not a equally proportionate growing supply of it, and you want to fill that. But what's going on the Vizsla front?
Well, our vision has always been to be a large scale producer of silver and gold from our Panuco district. But the question that we're answering is, where does the world's silver come from? And as I mentioned, there's only a few places that you really can operate a silver mine easily these days, and that's Mexico. Difficult in South America. Africa is kind of a tricky place. We've talked a little bit about Africa in the past offline, but it really is Mexico for us. And so I don't know if I've told anybody about the story of the district. And actually, that behind me, the map is a map of Sinaloa on our wall there that a good friend of mine from Sinaloa gave me, or Oscar gave me. And the initial founder or discoverer of the Panuco district was Francisco de Ibarra, and he moved in the mid 1500s. He came from Spain to visit his uncle, who was in Mexico and operating, basically in the benefit of the Spanish country and the church, I suppose. And he ended up building his own group of army and discoverers, and they ended up moving west. And he found two major silver cities before he died in Panuco, here in the valleys of Panuco. Durango, which is a huge city, and Durango is a massive silver place in Mexico, and Fresnillo, and now they've named one of the world's largest silver companies named Fresnillo, and they operate out of the Fresnillo district. And then his third discovery, and where he died, was Panuco behind us. And I'm sure your listeners know that we've consolidated this district for the very first time, in modern history. Basically since Francisco de Ibarra was there. It had always been fragmented. We're the only group that's been able to consolidate this district, and I think in time it'll be clear that this is same tenor as.
By consolidate, sorry to cut you off. Consolidate, you're saying that there's been a lot of various players, and part of your guys' focus has been acquiring those. So you guys essentially are the largest or main player in that district. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, we are. We're the only group that has any meaningful ground and all of the most important aspects of this district. It's a huge district, set 14 kilometers by 7 kilometers. But we were able to buy the two major halves of the district a couple of years ago. We completed that purchase last summer. And since then, we've been filling in some of the smaller concessions, but we really are the only landholder in this district now of any size. And because of that, we've been able to make a number of huge discoveries. I don't think the market really understands what we really have here yet. But as far as silver goes, you want to be in a country where you can operate, Mexico. You want a large scale project with many vein systems running through it. which we have here, and then you want high grade. And we've made high grade discoveries. We continue to make high grade discoveries. But what's really strange and what's different about Panuco is that we have very thick veins here. So the width or the thickness of the veins that we've discovered are abnormal. In Mexico, typically what you see is, a meter wide vein carrying 100 grams silver and maybe 1.5 grams gold. It's typically what you see. Our main structures, Napoleon and Tajitos, those are about 3.5 meters, 3 meters wide. But our new discovery, the Copala discovery, which has been an absolute game changer for us, is probably on average about 10 meters wide. So 30 feet wide vein that runs for about 1 kilometer. And, it's 40 meters, 400 meters down dip. So, multiply all of those by 3, essentially, if you want to go to feet. But it's huge. It's truly huge. And we've had some incredible grade there, like, multi-kilos, 5 kilos of silver over a couple meters, big intercepts. Now, I don't know any other company out there that's been able to as rapidly, as quickly put together ounces of silver in this district that we have. And that area that we have, Napoleon, Tajitos, Copala, those 3 major veins that we have are less than 5% of the veins that we know about in the district. So it's huge. It really is huge. We've been successful with drilling. We have 9 rigs turning. We've got tons of news coming. We're going to put out another resource update towards the end of the year, this year. But really what we're trying to do is put together a huge amount of silver and gold, and then move that into production, utilizing the production infrastructure, the mills, power, everything that we have there. And it's very exciting. We've kind of hit this inflection point with Vizsla, where we're very confident that what we have is major, and we're thrilled by it.
Is there a predetermined point at which you would begin mining? I know you guys already have the options and rights on some old mills and things like that, and you already have some permits that came with it. So in terms of turning it on, it's not a 10-year permitting process like it may be for some other discoveries. So is it a certain price of silver that a miner like you guys are watching? Is it a certain goal of amount of ounces you want to discover, or is it none of the above?
Well, I do have to be a bit careful how I say this, but internally we've always had a view that we wanted to be a 12 million ounce per annum producer of silver equivalent. That would be basically a 10-year mine life at those levels. So in order to do that, you need to get to a reserve of 120 million ounces of silver equivalent. We believe now that the potential for us to be much more than that 12 million ounce annual production is real. So what we're doing here is we're finding the natural limits of the areas that we've drilled into resources. So Napoleon, Tajitos, Copala, we're drilling those to understand the natural limits of those, and then calculating how much silver we have in those areas. Now, we are making new discoveries. There's other discoveries that can come. But basically what we want to do is get a large resource together, move forward through the economic studies, the scoping studies that Alsenko and the other groups are helping us with, and take that and build possibly one of the world's largest silver mines here in Mexico. So it's not so much a silver price. The silver price, I believe that the costs here will be relatively low. I think probably in the lowest quartile, I would imagine. Simply because, there's highways that run through the property, there's power, we don't have to build roads, we don't have to do crazy things in order to start mining. So the CapEx will be relatively low, and I think the OpEx will be relatively low. So it's not so much the price as much as it is, we're just sitting here, we're making more discoveries than we expected. We need to drill these things off before we move into production. But I don't think that the time it takes for us to go from drilling through to production will be onerous, and it's definitely not 10 years. It's a matter of years or less. So we're in an excellent position here.
Very good. Well, want to thank you for coming on today, and want to thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you smash the like button. I'll go ahead and link Vizsla Silver website right there down below. You can check out. I'll link Mike's Twitter as well that you can check out as well. And Mike, want to thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Jake. I always appreciate it. It's great to see you. Thanks, everyone, for listening.